Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this talk. In our series on the 4 contemplations that change the mind, we are in the 4th about dukkha, suffering, and I believe this is the 2nd in that series. And today's topic is a very important one. It is about not just this world and life as we see it, but the whole possible range of existences. The reason it's important is that these 4 thoughts that awaken the mind, that bring the mind to maturity, are there to prepare us for deeper teachings. They're called the foundations, the 4 foundations, or the 4 preliminaries. And like the foundations of a good house, those need to be solid, reliable, able to last. So the idea is our mind changes and makes us ready to receive Mahamudra teachings, Vajrayana teachings, and so on. So we've come to a crucial point now that we're near the end of these 4 ways of changing the mind. And there's something that cannot really be put off anymore. And it's a topic that many Buddhists are not very sure about. In general, it's about heaven and hell, and about past lives and future lives. I've talked about it before, of course, but now we've come to the time when you, or anyone who's doing these contemplations, has to sort it out for themselves. If you brush it aside, you want to leave it for later, you may be storing up problems for yourself later. The deeper teaching, Mahamudra, Vajrayana, takes us into a much deeper understanding of the mind. It's like surgery. You open up, you go inside, you explore what is there. It's very complicated, and one takes away what is not healthy. One brings in health. That process is very delicate. It's your mind. It's your most precious thing. And so this understanding about the possible range of existences and rebirths is a vital piece of understanding that will make your attitude towards this life, your attitude towards this mind of yours, ready for Mahamudra and the other deep teachings. In general, we're looking at existence beyond this life. Heaven and hell. In this life, we can witness other humans, those in very fortunate, very unfortunate circumstances, and these days, especially with the help of these amazing documentaries that have been made in the last 100 years, we can explore the world of animals in the forests, under the oceans, and so on. The attitude in which we need certainty is to know that this human world we experience just now, and this emotional and this psychological world that we experience just now as humans and Buddhists, is one part of a much, much larger picture. And now we have to think about that, explore it, and come to our own conclusion, whatever it may be. Buddhism has always had this broader understanding, both in terms of quantity and quality of the nature of existence. So although the old Buddhist world picture, Mount Meru, the 4 continents and all of that, is out of date now, nevertheless, the thinking that went with it is that this world is only one of a family of worlds similar to it, worlds where there are human existences. This world, in those teachings, is part of approximately 1 billion worlds similar to it with humans. So now, in terms of quantity, we know that, for instance, if this solar system of ours, which is so big, that Explorer spaceship has been going for years and years, and it just went past the edge of the solar system. If you could put all of that solar system and make it the size of a pinhead, then our galaxy would have a radius of some 13 kilometers. And our galaxy is one of millions, billions of galaxies. So the exoplanets, the places of human existence, surely also must exist. So Buddhism's always had this idea of a vast universe in terms of quantity, let's say, but in quality it's also had the idea that there is much better than this world, let's call them heavens, and there is much worse, what are called the lower realms, those of ghosts and spirits, and the hell realm. So we usually sum that up as heaven and hell. Now, as soon as people hear the word hell in particular, heaven too, sometimes they want to run out the door. And this is one of the things we need to think about. I have many friends who come from, for instance, Catholic countries, where as soon as they hear that Buddhism has got hell and heaven, are very disappointed. They thought they might find something else, because those ideas have been abused in their faith, or the faith of their country, and other faiths. So one point we need to think about very carefully is, are we going to immediately close our mind to the idea of heaven or hell simply because somebody abused it? Isn't that stupidity? We need to consider the ideas on their own merits as they are. For instance, electricity can be used to light up a room, or it can be used to torture somebody. It can be used or abused. And ideas, knowledge can be used or abused, and it is stupidity to throw something out completely because somebody else has abused it. Of course, we need to learn. If in Catholicism or whatever faith it is, it doesn't matter, if somebody has abused an understanding, then we must be very careful ourselves as Buddhists, as Buddhist teachers, as Buddhist lamas, that we don't fall into the same trap, using it to terrorize people or to make them afraid. So today, I want to give you some basic elements to help you reflect for yourself, to come to your own conclusion about heaven and hell. Some people have also a resistance, and I'll come back to that later because I think it's much more of a psychological than a rational resistance to the idea of heaven and hell, because they think they are reasonable, rational, scientific. But their science is outdated. A few hundred years ago, science measures what we humans experience through our eyes and ears, what we see, what for us is real. It measures that which is material, with material tools. But now we know through the evolution and development of science that what we see and hear is one tiny, tiny fraction of everything that there is. And for instance, these beautiful images of other galaxies that come through Hubble and the space telescopes and so on. They are enhanced in a colour range that we humans can see. Although, in fact, if we look through a telescope, we wouldn't see those wonderful images, Horsehead Nebula, and so on, that we see, because they're in a different part of the spectrum. So they've been coloured so we can see the different levels of radiations. So if a few hundred years ago we'd have told somebody about DNA or about dark matter or about these nebulae and their shapes and so on in the sky that no one can see with their eyes, they'd have thought you were mad. But they've been there all along. Science these days, quantum physics and so on, is very much, it seems, of the opinion that everything is consciousness. So really, with this truth of suffering, which is an audit of all the different forms of existence, and in each one, what is possible, what are the joys, what are the drawbacks, we really have a Buddhist map of the entire universe. And for us, and especially in Mahayana Buddhism, it is a universe of all the possibilities of this mind of ours, the possibilities of mind. All of them within what we call samsara, that is, possibilities generated by karma. Heaven and hell, as well as humans and animals and spirits. And let's start with heaven, because it's the most difficult. Hell, or the lower states, are grosser than this human realm, so we can imagine them, even if we can't directly witness them. Although I've met human beings whose clairvoyance, whose open minds, do enable them to witness those states. But anyway, that's another story. If you can see something this big with your eyesight, then of course you can see something that's bigger. If we can experience the sufferings we humans have, we can imagine worse sufferings, physical, psychological. But if you can see this much, you may not be able to see something that is a 50th of a millimeter. That's too fine. Even if it's there, you can't see it. The Deva realms, heavens within samsara, are more subtle. So I'd like to give some examples. Simple examples to set you thinking, because you have to think, you have to work it out. There's no point us plunging into all the detailed teachings on this type of heaven or that type of hell until we have grasped the essential point of, do we even believe that such things exist or not? So, some examples. Music. The untrained ear just hears sounds. But if you learn an instrument, you become more and more familiar with music. You start to distinguish more and more. You hear things you never heard before in the playing. And through that hearing, your appreciation, the beauty that's brought to you, can be more and more. Especially if you are a player yourself. In the end, you hear how each note can be so beautifully worked by a master player. And a novice can't hear that, can't appreciate it. People who are into taste and smell with food and drink can get a finer and finer appreciation. And for those who are novices, there's just nothing there. They can't tell the difference between a cheap wine and the most amazing, very rare and special wine or food. If we take another example, blind person, someone goes blind, they learn to read Braille. At first it's just rough paper, little bumps. But with time, their fingers learn not just to read through that, but to put into their imagination all sorts of ideas and landscapes through what they've become sensitive to. So these Deva realms are realms where either the senses, and all the senses combined, are much more subtle than here, or realms where through previous meditation as a human, then the mind is very, very quiet. And because of that, there's a level of subtlety that most humans cannot appreciate. We see that when we meditate. We learn how to go beyond gross distractions, thoughts and feelings, and then through that, such serenity, such peace. And we open up to a whole new world. And through shamatha, concentration, meditation, things start to happen. Our sensorial experience changes. We start to be more aware through time. We have a feeling of what's going to happen later today, tomorrow, what somebody's going to say. We remember things from the past. We pick up other people's minds and thoughts and so on. One becomes less captured within the patterns of ego thought and more open to the world around one. And this can go further and further and further, and also the mind can go inside into total absorptions. So we have Deva realms which are more subtle, and more subtle means that humans just have no idea until it happens. We don't have any prior experience to imagine what it is like. And then there are the lower realms, spirits, ghosts. Quite a lot of humans are sensitive to those. But then the hells. Now we should be very clear that Buddha did teach heaven and hell. There is no argument amongst the Buddhist schools about whether he did or he didn't. So in the Theravada scriptures, you'll find the Niraya, the hells, described. And in fact, it's the description that's there that's the same that's reproduced in our Tibetan Buddhist texts. They've kept the Abhidharma description of hot hells, cold hells, disgusting hells, nearby hells, and so on. This kind of map of the possibilities of consciousness. The idea is easier for us in a way, because we can witness in our world hunger, thirst, people dying in horrible conditions. I heard the other day about the time of the plagues in one city where people were queuing up to eat the excrement that was thrown out by other people. It's all they had to eat. In the Second World War, there were some heartrending stories of the squalor that people suffered in the camps. So we know that exists. You go into a psychiatric institution, the locked wards, the horrible states of mind that people are in, we know that exists. We ourselves can have nightmares and know how scared, how oppressed we can feel. So we can extrapolate and know that there is perhaps even worse as a possibility for the mind. All Buddhists, if they believe the Buddhist scriptures, the word of Buddha, accept heaven and hell. The arguments between Buddhists are quite what they are, how they are, whether they are real places like Australia and Japan, or whether they are states of mind, and so on. That's an interesting debate. And there's not one simple answer. It takes an understanding of mind to work out how it can be a place or a state of mind, depending on someone's level of perception. But that's the differences. It's not whether there is or is not heaven and hell. It's what exactly are heaven and hell. And in our own tradition, our great teacher, Gampopa, tells us that hell is a state of mind, and that everything in it is produced by our own mind. The way the hells are described, for instance, some of them have these ravens with iron beaks that peck at you, or torturers who push you back into boiling acid rivers, or burning molten metal ground. These are hallucinations. Gampopa said, what made those? Is it some being's karma to be reborn as a torturer in the hell? He said, no. Those iron beaks, the burning ground, these are produced by our own mind. And what happens is when we die from a human state, if in that human life one's done such horrible things, hurting others to a certain extent, one carries the memory of that, the programming of it, the karma of it, and that produces these hallucinations after death, these nightmares after death. But while you're alive, if you have a nightmare, your body wakes you up. After death, you have no more body. And this can go on and on and on, seemingly without end. It can get worse and worse. One loses all reference. It's horrible. So the point of this talk is this, and it really is the key point. If you get this, your Dharma practice will be enhanced. You'll be ready to go on. And if you don't get it, or you can't accept it, then it may not be so easy, and your practice can progress slowly. Of course, as Buddhists, we can learn to become more peaceful. We can learn to meditate. We can learn kindness and compassion, mindfulness. We can feel like a bodhisattva and go into service of others. We can do many things. But if you want Buddha's enlightenment, then this point needs to come home. And it's about our attitude to this life that we have. One state of mind feels that life ends with death. So it's kind of a gamble, a struggle. Can you make it through to death? Can you put enough money away so that you can retire? You might just live long enough, have enough help to get through, and then that's it. You made it through this life. Is our thinking, all of our effort day after day, all of the investment of our thoughts and dreams, is it to do with this life? In the perspective of just this life? Or, and so differently, are we thinking of this life as being like one page in a chapter of a long story? In which case, there's not just this life, there's the next life, and the life after, and the life after, and we're coming from a whole series of lives in the past. And if that's the case, and if you think like that, then you'll see this life as a brief and most wonderful opportunity to do something that would change that whole future. You won't get so involved and attached and waste so much of your time and energy on transitory daily things. You'll be looking forward even to the time of next Buddha. You'll be looking over hundreds of lifetimes to come. Like today, we don't just think and live for today. We're thinking of tomorrow and next week and next year. We're already making those coming times as good as we can. So like that, we think in terms of other life, and that will so much change our attitude towards this life. Do we believe in past lives and future lives? And do we believe in this huge range of possibilities? Now, I think that the problem many people have in coming to a decision about this is precisely this sense of denial that's inside. The implications of future lives and the power of karma and the Buddha's teachings on suffering are enormous. And if we take them on board, we have to change so much of the habits of thinking and reacting and looking upon ourselves and our life. We have to change them so much. There is no choice. And there's a resistance to that. The power of habit wants us to just ignore it, put it off. But in these 4 ways of changing the mind, we've come to a point where we cannot put that off any longer. We need to think, to deep think, to really not overreact and say, oh no, heaven and hell, sorry, I don't want to hear. Or not past lives and future lives and just say, oh well, if it happens, it happens. We need now to come to some clear conclusion. All the rest is the details. That last point's important. Please spend time with it. Feel if you have that resistance in you to face this possibility that this life is just one page of a chapter in a very, very, very long book. Do you feel like that? Or not? Are you trying to bluff it until the time of death comes and then you'll feel, made it. It's so different. It's so different. That's it for today. They are the main points I wanted to make. As always, it's such a pleasure to share the Buddha's teaching, the Dharma, with you. Thank you for listening, and I hope we can meet again soon. Thank you. Go well.